This is Dan Fagelli. You're tuned in to The Trajectory. This is our fourth episode in the AGI Governance series. Our guest is Andrea Miotti, who is the founder of ControlAI and one of the main authors in a report called The Narrow Path, which proposes a strategy for international coordination to sort of bound the capabilities of artificial general intelligence. We talk a little bit about what it would look like to get that plan in action with a pretty major focus on what day-to-day folks can do to sort of potentially influence the trajectory of policy, but also what it might take to get the great powers to come together for such a thing, which is obviously no easy task. Andrea adds a lot of additional detail to that in this episode and also shares some of his perspectives on maybe the ultimate uncontrollability of artificial general intelligence. So for those of you who haven't read The Narrow Path, this should be a lot more depth on some of the practical elements of what it might look like to put it in action. And for those of you who haven't, hopefully it'll be a good primer. So without further ado, we'll fly into the episode. This is Andrea here on The Trajectory. So Andrea, welcome to The Trajectory.
Thanks for having me.
Yes, glad to be able to catch up. My conversation with you is going to be a little bit unique because while some of our guests from the United Nations and the DoD and the big AI labs have sort of conjured forth their ideas in real time here on the show about what the future of governance would look like. The Narrow Path, which some of our viewers and listeners will already be familiar with, is kind of a thought out version of that. So you and I are going to be able to get into some of the specifics of what that path might look like and kind of how that future of AGI governance might sort of roll forth. I want to open with the first question I've asked everybody, which is how, on a 1 to 10, where you would score sort of the importance of AGI governance today. Not everybody's hair on fire right now, but they think maybe it's soonish. If you were going to put yourself on a score somewhere, where would you throw yourself on that continuum?
I would say definitely 10. I think the best time to react to an exponential, there's only 2 times to react to an exponential, too early or too late, and we need to react now.
I'm congenial with the phrasing there. So with that said, the idea here that I first want to unpack is sort of at a high level, what would we want AGI governance to achieve? Now, in The Narrow Path, you lay out 3 phases, and we're going to go into a lot of depth into the first one. But if you could, just for the folks that haven't already tuned in, and for those of you who are here, in the show notes will be a link to The Narrow Path so you can get a sense of the full report if you haven't already broken into it. But you've got an idea of kind of 3 specific phases that we're going to be able to go through. If you could do the few sentence version of each just so people can understand the structure, and then we'll kind of poke into them individually here.
Absolutely. So the big picture is we're facing an enormous threat from artificial superintelligence, AI that is smarter than humans across a wide variety of tasks, smarter than us at politics, more competent than us at science, at communication, and so forth. This is the explicit goal of many companies right now with billions of dollars in investment. It's some actors are trying to push governments to enter this race. It's not happened explicitly yet, but might happen. So that's what we're facing. And we're faced with an extinction level threat from this technology, as many CEOs, world leaders, Nobel Prize winners have recognized last year and across the history of AI. So what does the Narrow Path do? The Narrow Path presents a plan in 3 phases to address this problem. Phase 0, and we call it 0 because we really see it as the 0th step. Like if we don't even do this, we are in trouble and there's little point in trying to do anything else.
Yeah.
The goal is safety. We need to prevent superintelligence from being developed until we're able to deal with this level of threat. Very similarly to other technological threats in the past that we may face. Like the reality here is that whenever superintelligence is developed, right now we don't have any way to control it. We might never have a way to control it. And we're faced with certain defeat. If this was an adversary, if this was an opponent, we would focus 100% of our time and resources to preventing this opponent from developing the capability to defeat us. And that's what we need to do with phase 0.
Yep. So safety.
Prevent superintelligence at least for 20 years so we can build institutions, science, engineering to deal with it. Phase 1, stability. After we have, or at least in parallel, when we have prevented superintelligence from defeating us, we still have a bunch of problems. Many of these are about human versus human competition. even if many countries, including the leading AI powers, prevent the development of superintelligence, there's still going to be pressure internationally from rogue actors to perhaps defect on some of these measures, try to skirt around them, try to do rogue projects. So we need to find a way that not only we nominally prevent superintelligence and implement it in a few countries that agree to this, but also create a stable international system where countries can trust each other, that everybody is following the same rules, can find out where the rogue actors are developing this, and can give each other mutual guarantees that they're not, publicly committing to these measures, but in secret developing their own program. Because even just a suspicion of this, and even just a few accidents like these, even if they don't spell the end for us, they're going to spell the end for a cooperative regime where we are preventing this technology. And if we do all of this right, we get to phase 2, flourishing, which is how can we now, with these institutions in place, with the threat delayed and prevented, and with a stable international system that doesn't collapse over time, how can we actually face the fundamental scientific and engineering questions of controlling smart, powerful AI systems? Not all of them are going to be controllable. We don't know. Like, the reality is that we are right now in a situation where we don't understand intelligence at all. We don't understand machine intelligence at all. We are very primitive, but we have figured out many other super powerful technologies in the past with developing a robust science of them. We've done it with nuclear physics. We've done it in many disciplines. I believe we can do it with intelligence to a certain extent. And we've developed engineering practices and ways to bound the power of systems. And that's what we're going to need to do if we want to extract the massive value that we can get from powerful AI systems. Maybe not super intelligent, but extremely powerful AI systems that can be transformative for society.
And that's the flourishing phase. And we're definitely going to get into that as we talk about kind of to what end are we doing all of this. But now people kind of have a basic breakdown. And of course, in the full report that you guys can check out, lots of detail about kind of what those 3 phases would look like. I want to start with sort of our safety phase. A lot of this has to do with preventing AI that would improve other AI, preventing AI that would be totally unbounded, preventing AI above certain capability levels to the point where its ability to sort of agentically achieve things in the world, or maybe do a whole lot of things that we couldn't either understand or control, would be sort of barred. This strikes me as obviously requiring some pretty robust degree of intergovernmental coordination. And sometimes people will sort of level the charge that, this is a different level than chemical weapons or nuclear weapons here, because this is compute. It's a little bit tougher to sort of track. It's not plutonium coming over a border in a giant truck somewhere, right? This is sort of compute. So from your vantage point, in terms of bringing to life safety, clearly nations would have to get on the same page, and we'll talk a little bit about that, what that would require. But let's just say we solve that problem. What would they have to do to make sure everybody's compute wasn't pursuing these objectives that you laid out? Again, self-improving AI, unbounded AI, et cetera. And there's a lot of robust definitions in there. Talk a little bit about how you would see that going down.
Yeah, absolutely. And I actually want to start by saying that I don't think it's that different from plutonium or other threats that we've dealt with. Like, compute is a highly physical resource. And right now, what is compute in practice, right? Like, we can use the word compute, but in practice right now, it's massive data center grade GPUs, meaning like things that are this size or even bigger, that weigh a lot and are produced in a very, very thin supply chain spread across the globe, where a lot of the choke points, the bottlenecks, are in very specific locations. To name a few, TSMC in Taiwan is the kind of main manufacturer of the most advanced chips. ASML in the Netherlands is essentially the only company in the world that can produce these massive, absolutely huge lithography machines that kind of like print, essentially, or are utilized to print, to fabricate the chips. And all of this requires extremely specialized labor. Very few people on the planet know how to do this. It requires a lot of tacit knowledge. One earthquake or one accident or one one person getting the flu and spreading it to their colleagues could literally slow down this entire supply chain right now. So this is really, really quite easy to track, actually, in some ways more than uranium and plutonium. And we've done it with uranium and plutonium. There's a bunch of mines to mine uranium around the world. We found ways that are very low tech to monitor those, to enforce nuclear agreements. Like, we literally still go with inspectors, in person to check these mines. With AI, we can do much more sophisticated things that are also much more privacy preserving, to address what I completely understand is a concern of many people of what does this take? Like, does it take the government always spying on me all the time? No, it doesn't. It's the same as we do with many other forms of crime and of illicit technological development.
Got it. And I think there's certainly the state of affairs today does involve that thin supply chain. One could imagine China being able to sort of replicate one of those two things on their homeland within X number of years, just as an example, or some other firm in the States raising DOD money, or however they pull it off, or potentially some other compute paradigm that maybe repurposes GPUs at scale and some decentralized. I don't know, but I will tell you, there's a lot of people working on a lot of ways of getting access to more compute. There's a lot of GPU poors out there who still have a lot of money and are very interested in how to solve that problem. And there's a hell of a lot of talent and a hell of a lot of effort going into how do we maximize sort of the compute that we have. The paradigm today, though, does seem like we can look at and sniff out the things, right? Is it a football field of GPUs? Okay, there's only so many of those. Maybe, people have talked about tracking energy consumption, things along those lines. For you, let's assume it is, almost as simple as the uranium shebang, just to sort of keep with your current hypothesis here. What would that look like in practice between, the States and France and, the tough stuff here is China and whatnot, right? That's the real tough stuff. But let's just pretend everybody's holding hands. In practice, how would you envision it?
Yeah, so there's actually a few things that we developed in a narrow path that deal directly with things with these things that you said. So we considered actually electricity monitoring. There's a few reasons for and a few reasons against, but there's one way that we propose that again draws a lot from the nuclear playbook and would be really effective, and we haven't seen it proposed anywhere else in this field, which is having a cap not only on the size of a training run, so like a limit on how much compute to use for a specific training of a model, but also having just monitoring the total size of a physical data center. Because in practice, if we limit the amount of GPUs and the amount of flops per second, not flops as quantity, but flops per second that this single data center can do, we can measure how long would it take them, even if they were trying to violate any requirement on flops that they have. We can measure how many years or months it would take them to breach that limit. Let's say, for example, we have a limited 10 to 25 flop for training, or we require some further approval beyond 10 to 25. If no single computing cluster has more than 10 to the 19 flop per second of computing speed permitted, it would take them 3.2 years to breach this upper limit. So even if they wanted to defect, even if they wanted to skirt around the rules, there will still be a long time window for anybody who is monitoring it, in a specific country, the government itself, in an international context, a group of governments and so on, to monitor and intervene. This is exactly the kind of thing that we've done successfully with nuclear, where we are able to measure the amount of enriched uranium and plutonium that we need for essentially building nukes. And if we can ensure that a certain plant only has a certain level of capability, even if they want to breach these rules, it will still take them multiple years or months, and this gives you time to intervene. So a lot of these interventions are don't even need to look at exactly what's happening there. They just need to look at how large data centers are built, or how many things you run in parallel without violating any form of privacy of what you're doing on those GPUs.
Yeah, and I guess the supposition here is that there may be some additional breakthroughs as to how many square meters you can pack in XYZ QRS, new ways of doing cooling, new types of chips, new combinations of uses of chips, new more effective algorithms that require less just raw muscle to be able to get to level of capability X, whatever the case may be, bootstrapping off of other models in ways that we just currently can't do, but maybe we'll be able to do in the future. So sort of, the backyard garden shack size little GPU building is really not threatening now. It is possible that in 4 years it could be outlandishly so. We don't know, right? I'm not really sure. It does feel like these things are movable. I'm not saying that makes the entire approach invalid, but I'm just saying it does feel like there's a lot to account for because, man, if we can find some new way to pack them to the ceiling and do some, super beyond water cooling, we might be able to jack a lot more in there, and if we have new kinds of chips, we might be able to pack a lot more power in there with algorithms that can get ramped up way faster than, we have for these previous LLMs that we've been building for the last handful of years. I mean, what are your thoughts there? What would it need to look like to be nimble for that? Yeah.
So among those two, I think the ones that are most worth looking at is the speed in algorithmic improvement. I'm quite a believer in many cases, unfortunately, because I would like progress to go faster in many areas, that the world of atoms is quite hard to deal with,
super hard.
So it's much easier to get neural algorithms than to actually manufacture at scale better GPUs that are, much more efficient. Yes, over time, obviously, efficiency is going up. People keep saying that we're gonna hit the limit of Moore's law. We keep surpassing it and so on. But it still takes a while and takes a very long time to spin up new fabs. It takes a very long time and a lot of expertise to spin up new hardware. So I don't think the main threat model here is from hardware. I think software, definitely. We've seen very, very fast advances with algorithmic improvements in many ways, accounting for a lot of the progress we've seen in the last years. It's better. It's scaling up compute combined with better, more efficient ways to run algorithms. I think the reality is that right now we are facing this threat and we need to get time. We need to get a timeout on this level of capabilities that are just going to mean game over for us. Does this hold indefinitely, up to the physical limits? No, but most things don't hold up to the physical limits. Landauer's limit, which is kind of the limit on how little energy we need for computation, is extremely low, but also requires extremely exotic conditions, physical conditions that we're gonna be quite far away from hitting. But on your point of how to make it robust, well, yes. Part of it is this is why we have phase 2 flourishing. Ultimately, I do think we can get 20 years. I do think we can get more than 20 years. I'm pretty confident. Also by adjusting these measures, I do think we can get a lot by having clear normative prohibitions on certain things. Just essentially making sure that people understand and people understand that certain things should not be built. Certain things spell doom for all of us, and we should just move on to something else. I think a lot of things in human history are technically possible, but everybody understands that it would be insane for us to do, and we don't do them. On the very long run, we need to solve some of the fundamental technical problems of how to control very powerful AI systems, how to make our environment, our cyber infrastructure, our biological infrastructure, resilient to any attacks that powerful AI systems could have. But I think we are going to get a bunch of time if we do all of the things that we lay out in phase 0, and we can actually build our defenses then.
And we'll keep going into phase 0. I do want to get into the flourishing phase and also the idea of control and sort of where this takes us long term, and just kind of get into some of how you envision that. But continuing kind of along this trajectory here, you talked about, from your vantage point, the building size X that's, gets the okay. It's likely that will potentially become more dangerous as the software jacks up more so than the hardware. The hardware, as you had said, many, many more clunky factors have to come into play to really improve those things versus software improvements. Being able to know if in Beijing or in, I don't want to pick on China the whole time. I'm just not that afraid of Switzerland blowing the world up. I'm just not, right? It is what it is. I don't like, God bless the Swiss, right? I mean, like, great chocolate and stuff. Really smart people. But like, someone somewhere, developing some, breakthrough software wise, where now all of a sudden with the same hardware, they're getting way more done than they are maybe in other places. And of course, you have Facebook and others that are open sourcing everything. We shouldn't presume that everything Baidu discovers will immediately be accessible to everyone at DeepMind. We shouldn't really presume that. We love giving stuff away in the West. It's like our whole shebang. It's like how we get our jollies and our cool guy points. But like, there are places in the world where actually you kind of want to keep advantages to yourself. So being able to sort of have, this certain size and a certain power consumption, knowing when certain breakthroughs might be occurring, or being able to detect if those breakthroughs have occurred, does feel challenging. And again, I don't think it necessitates, maybe it doesn't, every laptop in the world must be, scanned by this central body that does these things or what have you. I'm not saying that that's necessarily the only solution. I'm just saying I do see hurdles. I like this idea of getting to a place of safety. I think it's a wonderful idea. I think hurling ourselves into an unworthy successor would be among the stupidest things we could do.
Fully agree.
But what is your take there? Knowing when and how these software breakthroughs happen, it's tough to detect this stuff. I mean, how would an intergovernmental coordination tackle that in a way that you would think is productive?
Yeah. So I mean, one big point here, like behind all of this, is why are we in this pretty shitty situation in the first place? Well, one of the reasons is that we don't understand intelligence and artificial intelligence in the way that we understand other phenomena. Like, that's really important to stress out.
Yeah.
If in a more normal situation, we would have a theory of intelligence that just lets us predict in advance, like, hey, I put this algorithm and this amount of compute, and I should expect exactly this amount of capabilities coming out at the other end. We don't have that. I don't think it's impossible to have it. Like, we were in this situation with chemistry, with physics in the 1400s. Like, in the 1400s, we were looking at chemical and physical processes, and we're just like, whoa, if I mix all of this stuff together, maybe I'm going to get the elixir of eternal life. Maybe I'm going to blow my face up, right?
Turning lead into gold, right?
Exactly.
Whatever, all these funky things, yeah.
Exactly. We just had no idea. And at some point, we did actually develop, robust, grounded theories of chemistry, robust, grounded theories of physics. And after that, we can model in advance, not everything, but we can model in advance, like, hey, if I put this amount of this element and this amount of this other element, I'm going to get that. At this temperature, I'm going to get that. And at this temperature, I'm going to blow my face up, so I'm not going to do it, and so on. If we do develop that science of intelligence, which is what we propose for ultimately flourishing, we can have this like level of precision, even pre-development precision, not even pre-deployment precision, of like understanding in advance, this type of experiment is probably going to lead to a really bad outcome. Let's just not run it. This type is great. It's going to make the system super powerful at processing images for cancer recognition, but it's going to help with nothing else. Great. Let's go ahead with that. And we do have a bunch of levers that we can already pull right now to do this kind of stuff. I don't think that international bodies and governments need to be monitoring every single breakthrough all the time. But to address that, what we need to do is we need to put safety margins that are like well below where we think we're going to stumble across rogue superintelligence, and keep ourselves below that. If you don't know, if you're treading in the darkness, you're just touching around and just feeling around in the minefield, you don't start running. Like, you want to first like shine a light on your minefield. Ideally, just stop in place, shine a light around you, make sure that there are no mines, and so on. And this is why a lot of the measures in phase 0 are about setting up the safety margins for ourselves. So we have time to react if something happens. We don't directly stumble. We don't go as close as possible to the danger zone and then hope that we can pull the brakes on time. But again, of course, over time, this will have to be adapted. Like, your point absolutely stands, and I agree. Like, over time, we're going to have algorithmic improvements. Some types of algorithmic directions should be limited, exactly like we limit certain types of experiments that we cannot control in terms of gain of function research. We know how that might go sometimes, and like we do understand it in biology. There are some things that if you just try to make super Ebola all the time, if you succeed and you don't have a closed off environment and a lot of protections in place, you're gonna wipe out a bunch of people, and that we shouldn't do. And we should approach the AI in the same way. And the more we build the science of understanding AI, the more we can experiment, and the more we can experiment with confidence.
Yeah. So again, for you, the biological sciences could be kind of a place of analogy again here. There was the previous Asilomar conference before the AI Asilomar conference, sort of about certain do's and don'ts within sort of the biotech world. From your vantage point, again, something international similar to AI could be achieved. It seems like I think it's great that there is a viable analogy there. It does feel to me at present that AI is a more power conducive thing than biotech. Like maybe if somebody did those dangerous biotech things, it's not clear that they would have the most valuable business in the world or that they would be able to conquer nearby galaxies. But it does seem like if you cracked AI, you kind of could. So we're sort of the ring of Sauron here is a little bit more appealing to want to get your fist around. You know what I mean? The prize is to be at the top of the dominance hierarchy of all life that we know of in the universe would be a very appealing thing for a certain caliber of ambitious persons. And the persons running these businesses and nations didn't get there mostly by happenstance most of the time. So the Ring of Sauron is pretty appealing here. But with that said, just from your vantage point, what do you think would get, I'm heartened that, the Peace of Westphalia happened, the UN was formed. These are like wonderful notions of sort of relative cooperation that were not perfect, but were way better than the state of nature, where we aligned incentives as a species, not just a tribe or a family, where we genuinely looked at how do we bound incentives that might be things we all kind of want, but net probably going to lead to bad stuff. How do we deal with this? And humanity has had a bunch of these, and we've failed sometimes, and there's been some cases that are wonderful. When you think of U.S., China, Russia, France, Japan, who have you, again, it feels like the OECD countries are not really going to be on a different page. But let's say the OECD countries and the less, the not OECD countries.
Yeah.
When you see them getting on the same page for this kind of basic let's survive humanity kind of mandate, what do you think gets us there? What's the tipping point? Is it social? Is it groundswell from the citizenry? Is it track 2 dialogues that lead to track 1 dialogues? What do you see as the click? Because that's kind of got to happen to make this dream come true for you.
I think it's a combination of all of them, which I think very often people have an intuition that kind of big thing happened because of big actions. Things like, a global change will happen because some single heroic action from a hero has happened. I think very often reality is more mundane. Like we are used to thinking about that from movies and from the narratives that we enjoy growing up. But very often, like change happens by small repeated actions by a medium-sized number of individuals, many of which are, putting very significant personal sacrifice for doing them, but it's still kind of repeated over time, compounds, beats single heroic action by the visionary hero. And the reality is that all of these other things that we have solved in the past have been solved significantly by this, and I expect it's going to be the same case here. Like the tipping point number one, I do think, to address your point also before about like people seeing this as giving them a throne from over which ruling over the entirety of the universe or the planet. Like, but step one, there is no throne. The only throne is going to be for superintelligence. If we build superintelligence right now, AI is going to be in charge, and we need to make sure that people understand this. Not everybody will understand this. Some people's hubris or some people's completely uncalibrated risk tolerance or non-concern for the fate of others will lead them to continue. But again, we need to play like most people are self-preserving. Most people are are family preserving. Most people want their family to live. Most people want themselves to live. People are very often, even too risk averse in areas where they're not actually about to die. And we just need to get this message through to elites, to, as you said, elites across different countries. Like, we need to make it clear that there is no winning an AI war. The only winner is the AI. No human is going to win in that war right now. No human is going to win in that conflict. No CEO, no world leader, no single country. And that's going to be a big step. Then, of course, track 2, dialogues, move to track 1 whenever it's possible. Also, credibly show that we will not tolerate defectors. We will not tolerate the rogue actors that just try to go ahead and screw the game for everybody else. And I think we can make it with that. But it's going to be a lot of these actions, small, repeated by a bunch of people in key positions.
This is great. I want to distill this. I don't know if this is in the same wording and in the same bulleted list in the narrow path per se, but I do want to shake this out. You've kind of listed 3 things here. There's kind of the track 2, track 1 dialogues. For those of you who are tuned in, a track 2 dialogue would be sort of conversations between the U.S. and China that might not be at the United Nations with the Secretary General in the room. They might be at the IEEE or in some sort of restaurant after some event that happens in Paris, in a couple months, whatever the case may be. You've got sort of this dialogue forming, which might be a whole lot of small nodes sort of starting those conversations. You have a big picture click that you hope to have happen, which is, hey, if we just hurl this thing into existence, there's really likely not to be a human winner here. There's sort of making that be a common understanding, that to be the shared understanding. And then there was a third point as well that you had there. I want to make sure I'm kind of congealing this, because this sort of getting the China contingent, the OECD contingent, I really hope for collaboration here, but it's tough. What are those again? I want to be able to bullet those out for people.
Yeah, I would say that the third one is, which I didn't go too deep before, but it's civic participation. It's like individuals, regardless of their level of influence, just doing their normal civic participation component that we expect in a democracy, which is like, tell your friends, tell your elected official, tell who you can, tell that you're concerned about this. This works very well. It's not quit your job and dedicate your whole life to this, but it's like, do your duty as a citizen. If you're concerned about this, tell other people. It works. It works to reason with them. It works to discuss with them. Like, do the step. Don't just assume that nobody is going to listen to you. Like, go out there and say it. I think this was a big mistake of of the AI, let's say AI safety or AI risk field for years. Like, a lot of the field approached the AI problem a little bit like people have approached the one ring of like, well, we've discovered that there is this one ring, and people knew that this was going to spell like potential extinction for humanity like 10 years ago, 20 years ago, right?
Yeah.
But they just kept it on the down low. And I think this was a massive mistake. Like, the real thing, the thing to be done would have been to start talking about this openly, start warning people, start telling people like, hey, we are the experts and we see this coming. This is really bad. We need decision makers to be aware of this. This is how we make decisions in a democratic situation. And this is how also we've got this is how scientists behaved in another historical example where actually there was a massive national security advantage in pursuing a technology, and yet we kind of banned it globally, which is human cloning. Scientists in the past, when significant advances in understanding of how human cloning would be done, when scientists realized that, they essentially gathered and said, like, no, this is dangerous for a variety of ethical reasons. We think this shouldn't be done. We are going to go with a unanimous voice to policymakers in the US, in China, elsewhere, and say this should be banned. This should not be done. We don't have a treaty on that, but we essentially have to call it a little bit ironically, a vibes moratorium, and it has kind of held until now.
Vibes moratorium. That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Somebody's got to coin that phrase. Anyway, keep going.
And a lot of thing for humanity are vibes based. They're not just legal based. Ideally, I am a great believer in the rule of law, and I think as much as we can codify, we should. But there's a lot of things like before we get to the exact nitty-gritty codification in law, we can still achieve socially and politically by making them essentially taboo. It's kind of like clear, like no, nobody should be doing human cloning. We don't have an exact penalty written down in the treaty, but we're gonna pressure you if you do it. We're gonna pressure you if we suspect you do it. Your colleagues in your own government are gonna be disgusted by you if you do it, and so forth. Like a lot of change happens like this, even without, even before you have a written down treaty on paper.
And I think this is an important thing to kind of grasp. And I certainly don't have the exact combination or the exact order of affairs, but it is clear that it is not complete laissez-faire or complete tyranny. In fact, to me, it is patently obvious that in almost every domain of civilization, whether it be my local town of Weston, Massachusetts, whether it be the United States broadly, whether it be OECD countries or what have you, the degree of sort of net benefit and like the number of signals of civilization is how well do you kind of calibrate the nuance between those two to settle in a place whereby, yes, some incentives are bounded. I am not allowed to break into that neighbor's house and steal their expensive computer monitors or take their car whenever I feel like it. And
their
they can't
food.
do that. Yeah. And they can't do the same to me.
Exactly.
But that's been a worthy trade. So that's somewhere between tyranny and the state of nature. And it feels like a pretty solid balance. I feel like in New England, I feel like civilization is kind of around me. I'm doing okay. And I think that in the international domain, it will also be nuanced. There will be social norms. There will be soft governance. There will be things like, the IEEE has Wi-Fi standards, that are kind of the same for different countries, right? There's little technical things. There's kind of social normative things that come up in enough track 2 conversations or enough citizen participation. There's hard law. There's, all sorts of various and sundry, governing bodies and whatnot that can cooperate across different boundaries. And so I think you're kind of highlighting maybe the tapestry that can be created here to find that middle ground between tyranny and the state of nature, which for you, again, is more than just the hard laws. You and I think, both believe in them, but they're not the only tool in the toolbox.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And important point is leaving the brutish and short, and where life is brutish and short state of nature, as Hobbes said, increases our liberty. Like this is a very important and empirical point. If you're spending your whole time trying to guard your food because somebody can just break into your house and kill you and take your food, you will not be able to do many things that you do right now. Like there are trade-offs there are positive sum trade-offs where we increase our liberty. If everybody had nukes in their backyard and could just detonate them at any time, which could have happened if we let nuclear technology proliferate to anybody on the planet, there would be no liberty. We would be dead or scavenging like in a post-apocalyptic movie. That's much less liberty than I have now, than you have now, than anybody has now. So
no doubt about it. So there's clearly a golden mean to be struck. And again, what you and I are trying to fiddle through is sort of like, what does that look like precisely? So for you, there's civic participation. There's kind of track 1, track 2 dialogues between countries. And then there's a number of these different sort of forces and factors that would hopefully get us on the same page. The shared understanding that there is no winner, I think, is a click. Yeah. Now let's drill into that. I think that's a valid point. Now, from our various Twitter dialogues, I think you and I have, you're an understanding that sort of my belief is probably if we hurl steroids under the first thing that smells like strong AI as much as possible, it is unlikely to be a worthy successor and treat us well. Might even be unlikely to proliferate value into the galaxy. Just feels like that's not a win, really. However, right now, you have some folks who really do believe, however powerful it is, it'll kind of do what we want. You have eminent people. Andrea, I hate to tell you, you could watch this channel if you wanted, right? You could listen to Richard Sutton. You could listen to people that are like deeper in the science than you and deeper in the science than me, who genuinely have beliefs of sort of kind of maybe inevitable benevolence from intelligence, of these systems being eternally controllable in some way, shape, or form. Like there are monumentally intelligent humans with these beliefs. And so to get to a uniform state of affairs where everyone would understand, if we go hard on this thing and we just blast it off, it's going to just use the atoms for whatever it wants, yada, yada. It feels tough to kind of get to that as a consensus. And I have to admit to you, I likely believe it's true. I don't know for sure that it is. I'm unwilling to concede 100%. I just think the dice roll is clearly too goddamn risky. But so, and I think so we don't have to get people to faith believe. I think we just have to say the permutations of AGI that treat us well seems like a thread, and we don't know how to ride that thread. I think that's a reasonable place to get people. But you've got eminent folks that believe otherwise. And you have inevitable benevolence in eternal controllability, right? It'll never have agency, whether they use human soul language or they scientize human soul language, that they'll say something like that. And again, I'm not disparaging these folks. I enjoyed my conversation with Sutton greatly, even though we disagree on many things. What does it look like to get to that consensus? Because that's one of your three key linchpins here of like, what's going to get the quote unquote adversaries to get on the same page as a species together. That one is a big one. What's going to make that click?
Well, I think honestly, I've rarely encountered somebody though that actually believes in some of these things. My understanding of Sutton is that he's fundamentally a successionist. I obviously don't like that, but he does. I don't think, and I might review the conversation, but his main point is just it's good that we have a more intelligent AI successor for us, and whether we make it or not in this transition, that's just a secondary consideration for him. And in practice, kind of like leaving aside the individual opinions of people, like we've had massive consensus building exercises that have already been done. We have the Center for AI Safeties statement that's been signed by Nobel Prize winners, by like 2 out of 3 the Turing winners. It's been signed by all of the CEOs of the main companies. I'm going to list them for the audience, but Demis Hassabis, CEO, Google DeepMind; Sam Altman, CEO, OpenAI; Dario Amodei, CEO, Anthropic, and stating that mitigating the extinction risk from AI should be a global priority alongside other societal scale risks, such as pandemics and global wars. Now, obviously, we're never going to have 100%. There's obviously going to be dissenting voices, and that's good and healthy. But also, for most of our history, we haven't, we don't just expect 100% consensus on everything. Like in many cases, if we were in a situation like this, where tobacco CEOs in the 60s just all came out and signed a letter stating, we know our products give you cancer, and we should really work to mitigate that, we would have been in a completely different situation. Like this is kind of as much consensus as you're ever gonna get in a pluralistic society where some people even just want succession as quickly as possible. Like we need to work with this. Most people, in my experience, most policymakers I speak to, like absolutely do not want to cede control to AI. Very often neither now nor in the future. Like they just don't know that this is happening. The main thing that it's stopping people is not, actually I expect we're going to be able to control forever more intelligences that are to us what we are to ants. Usually their expectation is just like, I didn't know anybody was even building this. I didn't know that people were even trying to do this. If they're trying to do this, it's pretty fucking scary. And most governments want to preserve their power. Most individuals want to preserve their control over their own life, and they don't want to cede it to AI. So I think our job there is more to speak to more people rather than our fundamentally very basic points being controversial.
Yeah, I think it's, the signing of the letter, I commend Hendricks. He was on our first series with Bengio, which was kind of AGI futures, where we kind of plotted where they want to go in the longer term. I commend what Hendricks did in terms of there was some good wielding of kind of, so the mandate of heaven, if you want to be like the emperor of China, is like the same dynamic as far as I can tell for artificial general intelligence. You got two strata. You have sort of just raw power, like in AI terms, this would be like literal power, and compute and talent, and access to additional resources and what have you. And then you would have perceived benevolence. So you need to, if you're the one scoring highest on both of those strata, and you get to pop off, you're probably going to get there first. Now, I'm not saying that's a real prize, right? You and I are somewhat on the same page. It'll probably devour them, at least at this stage of our understanding. But there are people gunning there. And so Hendricks, I think, flexed the fact that they all know they need to be perceived as benevolent to get them to kind of dotted line. Now, Altman, as far as I can tell, patently obviously understands this stuff could easily just swallow us all up. I mean, you look at his interviews before OpenAI, it's all obvious, right?
Yeah,
Musk, you look at Musk's quotes back in the day, they're just so numerous, it's ridiculous. Yeah, yeah.
Now.
But what is he doing? He is racing to the finish line. And so this is where we talk a little bit about incentives. I want to get into your thoughts about this. As far as I can tell, and I'm not telling you I like it, and I'm not telling you I conjured it. I don't have control over the world. As far as I can tell, if you're worth, I don't know, 30 billion or more, and you're in tech, you sort of have like a couple choices, and they're pretty limited right now. One of them is you build the sand god that will probably devour you if you're honest with yourself. Like it'll probably devour you, but that final pop will be of your doing. If there's any final flex, if there's any great satisfaction, you will have the satisfaction of populating the galaxy with whatever is beyond, even if it devours us. Or your second option is to be devoured by someone else's sand god. And like there isn't right now, currently. I'm not saying it's impossible, but I'm saying if you're Dario, right? You leave OpenAI to be the good guy, and I'm not bastardizing anybody. I think every organization and organism acts in their self-interest. This is my personal belief. Psychological egoism, I think, is functionally correct. And I think that when you get close to the scepter, you grip that bad boy. If you're Robespierre, you talk a lot about certain virtues, but when your butt hits the cushion, you start lopping heads off, man. It is what it is. I don't think there are good guys. I don't think if I put Leahy holding the scepter magically, he would act in the interest of everybody, or Goertzel or anybody. And I like all these people, genuinely like them. Don't put me there. I just don't think you want. And I think governance structures are about that. They're about understanding that element of, that's what governance literally. So I think I'm respecting Goertzel by saying like, dog, I don't want you or me to fucking hold the scepter, period. I think we need something more than that. So I can't even blame them for racing, but they're racing. And if we think about who has the money to do lobbying, there's a handful of companies that have the most money to do lobbying. And fortunately or unfortunately, my friend, they are also the companies that are closest to birthing the sand god here. And so how do we bubble up some consensus of the fact that this is dangerous? I think the lab leaders damn well know it, but they're like, well, F me. If I'm gonna be eaten by Musk's sand god, screw that. I'd rather be eaten by my own, right? I want to go out in my own blaze of glory. And maybe there is a chance, and I think there really is. There is a chance that someone cracks it, and they actually do get to ride on top of it for a little while. And for a minute, it could be an hour, it could be a month, it could be 3 years. They get to ride on top of that grand, inconceivable wave and look down. And that final ultimate dominance, I think, would be like extremely thrilling and very hard to turn down. So they're gunning for it, and they have the money to do the lobbying. How do we battle that?
Well, so for any $30 billion net worth plus listeners, right here, I think you have a third option, which is exactly like play to build the coordination to stop this. This is a coordination problem. Like it's a classic coordination problem with a bunch of other stuff. Like I think, like me and you agree that I think the payoff that they see is not. They're kind of seeing a skewed payoff. There's a hubris that is making them see a payoff that is too skewed towards the infinitesimal upside that they will have for 2 seconds. But ultimately, as a society,
or it's skewed towards just I want to, if I'm gonna die and lose or die and win, I know what one I want. And I think if you don't think that men of their stamp can have that thought, you certainly haven't read history. I think history is literally just scattered with that exact notion and that exact kind of behavior. So I don't even know if they're counting on the win. I think they're just counting on not losing.
But as you said, this is why we have governance mechanisms. It's like this is why we built over time governance mechanism to not just let society be plundered and pillaged by megalomaniac behavior, which this is. It's not self-interested. If in the end, self-preservation is pretty important. But it doesn't matter. Kind of like the main point is, I agree with you. It doesn't matter what the motivations are. The important thing is to articulate, no, there is the other option. The other option is coordination. This is how we solve this kind of game theoretic dilemmas of make it very costly to continue defecting on the commons and give a carrot to joining in the coordination game.
Absolutely.
Like it's kind of like the question, like, oh, what should have Dario done? What should he have done? Like, of course he's gonna try to play for the sand god. No, he had a lot of power, and he could have moved away and called out the risks very clearly and used the power and influence to do something else. And again, going back to like any listeners with a very high net worth, what can you do? You can counter this. You can speak to your other high net worth and likely wanting to preserve their own existence friends and tell them like, hey, this is coming. A bunch of people are trying to build the sand god that might eat you all and everybody else. Coordinate, find a way to stop this, find a way to also give these people a good out. Very often, what, I don't remember if it's I believe it's Sun Tzu a statement of, you want to build your enemy a golden bridge. Like in many of these cases, like if these people are actually self-interested, let's build them a golden bridge away from building the thing that eats us all, but make it very clear that we find it unacceptable and we will intervene as a society and we will coordinate to stop things that put all of us at risk. I'm completely happy for Altman to make billions in most other industries.
No problem whatsoever.
No problem whatsoever. Just not risking the life of all of us.
Smart.
And we should coordinate.
Yeah. So I'm totally with you there. And there's so much to be done to kind of talk about the specifics of sort of what it looks like to wield more influence than the most powerful and rich companies in the history of humanity. But you've outlined a handful of the points that I think are worth hanging on to. And I want to touch on some of the other elements from the narrow path and from sort of your vision moving forward. I think we've been able to shake out a little bit of the near term. And I think getting to kind of the meat and potatoes of how you see that is helpful. I hope for the listeners sort of thinking about what could beginning even look like. I hope that this has been helpful for them. I think it's been fun for me. We do our safety shebang. We do our stability shebang. We've got robust intergovernmental coordination mechanisms of really ensuring this stuff doesn't run out of hand. I'm gonna before we're done here, I'm gonna talk about whether AGI is controllable in the first place. But presuming it is, we get to this the second stage, stage 0, 1, 2 of flourishing, and flourishing is a shorter chapter compared to the other two in your report. Clearly, it's less pressing in the near term. Like you said, stage 0 is let's just not birth an unworthy successor and be consumed by it. But stage 2 is sort of short. It's a little bit about, the wealth that could be reaped from this. I imagine the traditional anthropocentric sort of notions that we could think of as a good outcome, which would be, hey, we've got 500 years from now, we've got happy humans on Mars, a certain number of them, happy humans on the moon, I guess, if they want to. Maybe we've got some space station cool stuff because like AI can build some really crazy cool stuff. And everybody's well fed. Maybe they can live for a really long time because of advances in science or whatnot. And maybe there's some kind of great babysitter that keeps us from warring with each other, and it's aligned to do that. What is your definition of flourishing? Just to clarify for the folks who are kind of tuned in here.
Yeah, here we focus on clearly human flourishing. So very much on what can humanity get out of this. What we don't focus on is on alignment, because I think that's where we're gonna agree. We're gonna agree quite a bit, even though we disagree on some other stuff. Where yes. I don't think ultimately, or we don't know how to do it now. Definitely, how humanity can control something that is massively more powerful than itself. Like ultimately, if you have a massive power imbalance, like truly massive, you are at the mercy of the more powerful entity. And the more powerful entity might like you, might find you useful, but you're clearly in a subordinate position. And our focus with flourishing is to say like, no, I'm a human. We are human. We want to stay in control. We want to make human life awesome. We want to make human life awesome in all the ways that you've described. I think, humans, it's absurd that we still die and rot away with diseases. Like, obviously, we should find ways to get rid of that. Like the history of medicine, like even up to the beginning of the last century, it was very common to say like the mission of medicine is to eradicate disease, to eradicate death, right? Like we have forgotten how to speak like this. Maybe we've become meeker and less willing to see the grand things that we can do as a species. But this should be obviously a common goal. Like why should we die by accident or by our flesh rotting or our brain getting weaker? Or at the very least, let's make our lives as long as we can, and let's make the lives of those who want to as long as they can. If somebody that wants to not, up to them, that's fine. But ultimately, I am skeptical. I don't know if it's impossible, right? Like we just don't understand enough about intelligence that I'm skeptical that you can genuinely control. It's kind of a logical impossibility of genuinely controlling something that is so much more powerful than you.
We're on the same page there.
Yeah. So a big focus of flourishing is actually to focus on control, not alignment, of AI systems that are useful for us, that are transformative. This means very often that they're not the godlike super intelligence that many people want, but they can be, some of them can be narrow, some of them can be narrow but chained up together to achieve our goals. Some of them can be general, but only insofar as we're staying well in control of them. And ultimately, people meaning humans, are clearly and strongly in control here. And I think this is the path that most people want when they think of, like, what are the upsides of AI? Even Altman, or others, like many of the CEOs of the companies, like when they need to give the spiel about like what's the good side, what's the upside. It's a combination of a vague combination of, sometimes they say post-scarcity, sometimes they say like revolutionizing science. Here we try to be a bit more concrete and say like, post-scarcity in the limit doesn't exist, but like surely we can do much better. There's limited numbers of atoms in the universe.
Yes.
For a lot of post-scarcity, we don't need AI.
We don't need unlimited. Yeah.
And also we don't need AI. Like we have reduced scarcity in many areas by improving farming, improving doing more trade, improving liberty, and so forth. And there's a lot of that is social coordination among humans. How do we not only produce an enormous amount of resources, but how do we just find positive sum trades between us? But yeah, ultimately, that the vision here is to get the future that we want with AI, which is a future that will be still quite shocking for most people. It's going to be quite sci-fi for most people. Like we're going to be able to achieve scientific feats that extremely quickly that we haven't achieved before. We need to build AI from the ground up to be controllable. Not aim for the god, for the most complex and most powerful AI system that we can, and then hope that it follows our bidding. It's
somehow
not going to follow our
likes
bidding.
us.
Exactly.
Yeah. So we do agree on this. And over the course of the unpacking this flourishing point, I'm very much not going to aim to change your mind in any way, but I want to skirt around the edges of kind of where you see flourishing. I think that there is a perspective, and Leahy kind of brought it up in his interview, which will be airing a little bit after yours, that, talking about where are we going to get after we can kind of keep AGI from destroying us and maybe make sure that there's some control here. What would we hope would be the outcome? There's one belief set of like, even talking about that is like too much division. Let's just focus on what matters. I think there's also a notion that having a sparkling vision of a city on the hill is maybe even how you unite people, Like I'm not sure when the Venetians built Venice and they smashed those wooden piles into the swamp and built their early buildings, I think part of it was like, God, we just got to get away from the barbarians on the mainland. But I think at some point, there was a shared sense of like, we're not just going to be sad swamp people, like eating an occasional fish and barely surviving. Like, we're going to make this into something. And as it turns out, Andrea, they did. And I think that actually a vision of preferable futures, of a worthy future, I think can be a uniter to handle risks. And not necessarily a divider. I think it could be both. And so I'm very interested in painting what worthy futures could be. I think some of it gets a little scary, and understanding kind of the incentives on your side, I think there is a big drive to be able to appeal to a person. And I would agree, most people, just persons. I pick a random person here in Weston, I fly to Alabama, pick a random person down there. They're almost certainly speciesist, and would prefer a future that looks, feels, and smells like a world where opposable thumbs and trimming fingernails and going to the bathroom is a thing. And the things that we understand as human are things, love and poetry and other beautiful things too. I'm not demeaning humanity here. Similarly, though, I guess if we think about the future you're articulating, you're saying some of it will be sci-fi. Let's just paint a little bit of that. So I'm going to dance a few ideas. I'm just scatter them on the table. Yeah. And you say, which ones do you think like, oh yeah, no, Dan, I'm congenial with that. So one is like, diseases are cured. There's a lot of horrible diseases, particularly diseases of the mind, where people suffer tremendously, that we would hope to be able to sort of get rid of. There might be, making sure everybody's fed and with really nutritious and also delicious foods or something. There might be ways of achieving meaning. I'm not sure if work is going to be super valuable then, but there might be ways of achieving meaning or something along those lines. We might live in a space station or on the planet Earth or on the planet Mars. Like, which of these are sort of part of the panoply of kind of this human-centric good future that you're thinking of here? Yeah.
Yes, a few of them are like, one of them I am morally neutral on it, but I think it's going to happen if we succeed, which is, as you said, work is going to be much more of a hobby than like people would want to do activities because they fulfill them. But, if we can control powerful AI systems, even just narrow AI systems that do what we want, we will essentially be able to automate the vast majority of human activities. And we will need to also, like, this is going to be a question, and I'm going to leave it as an open question. I don't have the answer. We're going to have to decide as a society, which activities do we still want humans in charge just because we're human? Things like politics. We are going to have AI systems that can do very complex trades with each other, and they're going to like understand very much the nuances of human cognition. We still might want to have humans in charge. I think we should have humans in charge for a very long time, potentially forever. That's maybe where we disagree. And so in some areas, we want to kind of fence off and say like, no, it doesn't matter that technically you can get the AI to outperform the human. We are pro-human. We keep the humans in. Or some other areas you're going to have the AI can do it much better than you, but you like doing it. You do it as a hobby, but don't no illusion that a lot of human labor will actually be particularly economically valuable. Like the moment you have machine systems doing things, they survive under harsher conditions. They can easily copyable. They can be deployed in many places. A lot of stuff that we don't like doing, we can easily get rid of, and a lot of stuff that we can do, we're still going to be able to automate, and then we will have to decide like, do we want to automate it or not? On disease and health, in practice, I think it's, as I said before, I think it's absurd and saddening that we don't have as a societal priority to abolish death and decay for anybody who doesn't want to die and decay, right? It's a tragedy. It's a continuous tragedy for individuals. I'm sure that, anybody listening has had at least one experience of a loved one, or seeing friends see their loved one experience this. They also, right now, you're going to experience that at some point in your life. Do you really want that? If you do, up to you, that's fine. I think most people reflecting on their life, they wouldn't want that to happen to them. They wouldn't want to have their cognitive decline happening involuntarily and so on. And a lot of those things, do we know exactly how to do it? No. Do we have some directions that we can take? Obviously so, with and without AI. Like right now, we could be right now, leave AI out of the picture. We could be spending trillions of dollars trying to solve aging and trying to get people. A very important thing to understand. It's not living like an old person for hundreds of years.
Yeah.
It's
living healthily, right? Good years.
Exactly.
Good years. Yeah.
Defeating aging. It's living a longer life where you are healthy and physically healthy and mentally healthy for a much longer time. This is obviously possible. Like we are proof of that. Like if we were 500, 600, 1,000 years ago, we wouldn't look like we look right now on this call at our same biological age, and so forth. It's like that obviously should be a priority. Space exploration. There's a bunch of debates there.
Yeah, you talked about the sci-fi things. I want to kind of unpack for you. You're like, hey, it'll be good for people, but some of it'll be different. Like, again, you've got to make this digestible for the everyman. I understand your incentives here, but like, how would you explain some of those sci-fi differences? Not dying is already pretty sci-fi for some people.
Exactly.
Not working, kind of sci-fi. What are some of these other ones that are going to be maybe jarring, but could be a net good? Yeah,
some of the jarring ones that I don't know that are going to be a net good is the question about living in more and more simulated environments, which I know is something you talk about a lot. And this is where again, like, I want to go back to my point of we basically get to meaningless talk when we talk about aligning superintelligence, especially when like the AGI companies talk about aligning superintelligence, because a lot of those things are like, if you have something that is superintelligence and they can, for example, give you simulated experiences, stimuli directly to your
neurons, individual neurons.
Or even just like, let's go even less sci-fi. Just give you super good VR glasses.
Great.
Giving you the smell that you want, the taste that you want. Like, this is stuff that we can kind of do right now as puny, as puny civilization that we are. Like we're not that far away. And like, what's the meaning of controlling or aligning a superintelligence where this superintelligence can decide like, well, I think it's for your own good that you're going to experience this on repeat forever and you're going to really enjoy it. Like, this obviously breaks a lot of our notions of individual free will and individual ability to determine our own destiny. Because if you kind of have this enormous nanny state that is a super intelligent being that can just warp your thoughts and give you hyper stimuli way bigger than what you could concoct yourself, you're never really free. Like, you're never really free and in control. And it becomes kind of meaningless to talk about whether it's aligned to your desires or not. It can manufacture your desires. Like, your desires are going to be downstream of its inputs and not upstream. So this is why I personally think, and this is the big path with flourishing. It's a path to keep humans firmly in control. It means also giving up on some of these superpowers for superintelligence. That would mean that we lose our freedom and ability to decide humanity's destiny and be the causal arrow that like makes things happen.
The prime agentic force in the universe. In the universe is in so much as we know it. So let me just poke into that a little bit more. So I think we'll have fun with this. And again, I'm not expecting to alter your opinion or anything. I want to ferret out the edges of the ideas and see sort of where these land and how other people could conceive of them. Because like you said, some of this is a little bit sci-fi for some folks. But just to touch on that, I would suspect that if AI already on my phone going for a walk, I can scroll through unbounded panoplies of different kinds of musical and visual experiences. That is, in my opinion, 98% of the way to the last step, which just be like, if I want to feel relaxed, conjure for me what will make me feel relaxed. If I want to feel entertained, conjure for me. If I want to learn a skill, conjure for me the ideal lesson where, if my eye tracker shows that I'm paying less attention to this part of the lesson, you change the colors or you ask a different question or hyper calibrate it specifically to my needs. These could be needs to learn and grow. They could also just be needs to feel something. I think a lot of our actions are simply ambulating between drives. We feel sleepy. We have sexual needs. We have whatever. I think a lot of us, I think it might be the case that if we really got under the hood, it's like billiard ball level degrees of agency between those drives. But I'm not going to make a call about free will on this particular chat. I'm just saying,
but
I think we do a lot of that.
Elephant in the brain, just dropping it there.
Certainly. Yep. Jonathan Haidt and Hansen both have some interesting stuff about this. I mean, so, but with that said, I think when we can experience those sorts of experiences, I expect a bit of a bifurcation. I think for some people, they will augment their experience in order to kind of escape the state of nature, which is, I think, what humans are trying to do. We might even say it's kind of the goal that you're kind of trying to articulate here with AI, escaping the state of nature. Religion, getting beyond the veil of tears, samsara. This is just right now we live in this world where you got to fight, you got to survive, you got to die, and just leaving that forever is sort of this pleasant dream. Some people will eat the lotus, as it were, and will aim to escape the state of nature. Others will augment themselves in order to potentially be more capable and potentially even continue to do the things that nature mandates, cooperation and competition. They're both real. It's not just one. It's not, we're not in some, Mickey Mouse land. So they'll augment themselves to act more. To your point about volition, some people will take their whole bar of volition and they will wipe the slate clean and say, AI, bring forth to me what you can bring forth. There are already people doing this. They work the job monotonously and don't pay attention, scroll on their phone the whole time, come back home, Netflix, beer, whatever the case may be. We might argue, to the best of their technological ability, they're already in Lotus Eater mode. And if they can level that up, they're going to want to wipe the slate clean. I think there's others who are going to want to continue to narrow the band of agency. So you and I, at least for me, I don't know what you do, I don't grow my own food. Like I'm not like getting water out of a well or anything. Like there's I'm not navigating by the stars. There's a hell of a lot of agency I have completely tossed aside to society and or technology so that I can focus on the narrow band of what I care about, which is this sort of grand moral cause of posthuman intelligence, is sort of where things are going here. So some people will shred away even more of what they don't care about and focus on the knife's edge of like where they want to focus their attention. Others, I think, might wipe it all the way. Are you saying, Dan, I think we should think about structuring, an international community of sorts so that we don't have maybe anyone or maybe most people who wipe it away and are simply kind of in the pleasure pod? Are you saying that, like, Dan, I think that would be a net ill and we almost shouldn't allow for it? Like, what is your take there?
Yeah, my take is that ultimately we do want to expand human agency in the things that matter in the way that you describe. Like technology is useful insofar as it augments our ability to have leverage over the universe. And now, the specific trade-off of like how many Lotus Eaters can we sustain? I don't know. It's obviously not 100%. Like I think the reality is that we can't sustain 100% Lotus Eaters, and also we can set up that the positive way to understand this is like what I believe we should do as humanity, as a species, is to like increase the number of positive sum trades that we can do with each other, and increase the amount of agency that we have over our environment and over the universe. This has been, again, already the trajectory of what science and technology has been, and human coordination has been for our entire history. Like when we were just, early hominids, our agency was quite limited, and we worked pretty hard. Doesn't have to be consciously worked at the beginning; can just be a evolutionary process. But a big part of it has been evolutionarily. We have improved on the scale, and at some point we started understanding what we're doing, and we started consciously expanding that. And I think that's fantastic. I think another thing that a few people put very well is escaping Darwinism, going beyond the need for death as a forcing function for improvement. It's like this has been the case. This has been de facto the case in a lot of areas for a long time in history. The more we become technologically powerful, the more we can essentially throw away these more brutish and evolutionarily selected ways and do it more intentionally. It's again expanding agency of humanity, and giving humanity the opportunity to wield this and to wield more and more power over the universe and more and more power over our own destiny. It's one way you can see this is like an increased amount of self-mastery individually and collectively. Like ultimately, this is what self-mastery is on an individual level. You know, since the Stoics, or since even earlier, it's always been about recognizing where we lose our own ability to direct our actions, keep control of ourselves, increase the control of ourselves, and therefore increase the ability that we have to affect the world. And I think this is the ultimate positive vision for humanity, is increase the scope of human agency, increase the scope of the agency of every individual, increase the amount of things that we can do and the amount of power that we can wield.
This is very much in line with where we're headed here. I often use the Spinoza's idea of potentia. So potentia is like the total set of, so the conatus is the impetus to not die. Potentia is the total set of powers that permit one not to die. That is fangs and claws. That is the ability to camouflage. That is the ability to fly. That is the ability to speak. And importantly, that is mostly an probably unlimited set of powers that have yet to bubble out of nothing. So most potentia hath not bubbled up, just like Zoom calls were not a thing for early hominids, right? Or even language, certainly to any degree of the granularity you and I are sharing now, was not a thing for really early hominids. Probably didn't have even the hardware software to pull it off. Poetry and whatnot. The first things walking on two legs. So this is taking us to an interesting place. I've got two kind of questions I want to unravel about this. This idea of kind of power and control, I'm very congenial with. I think that that power to not perish is a great thing. There's an idea that there's a bit of inevitability here around the augmentation of what humans are. So, there's a version of the future 500 years from now where we got the people on Mars, the people in the spaceships or whatever, they're trimming their fingernails. They get jealous sometimes, but they're like eating good food and like they don't have to be overweight if they don't want. They don't have to die if they don't want. They're bounded from harming other humans by maybe some great AI overseer in some way. But in general, like they're cool with that, whatever. That's a version of 500 years from now. There's another version of 500 years from now where people have almost as unlimited a memory as the most powerful, computers, because they're kind of jacked in to sort of outsource certain mental capacity. So enhancing creativity, maybe having two qualia experiences going on at once. Maybe, again, not having to store memories in wetware, but in totally different substrates that can be, anonymized and encrypted or what have you, however the hell that would work. And maybe they don't need to sleep anymore. Maybe they don't feel sad when they're not in a romantic relationship. Maybe that's not even a concern. Maybe there's an entirely new strata of blissful experiences that they can swim in, gradients of bliss. You and I kind of have to float above and below zero all the time. But like, why? Like, why? Like, weird. I'm like, death being tragedy. I'm with you, dog. Suffering being like default, like the gestalt of suffering and pleasure being necessary for all things that live. Fuck all that, bro. So like we could imagine a version 500 years forward where those kinds of vastly, we might even argue how human are these things. Those things are an extrapolation of us. And the reason that might occur, and I'm going to pass this to you, is what you and I are doing right now is already, if we could go back 80 years and speak to your grandmother in wherever she was in Italy, I'm presuming. I don't know where your grandmother was. I'm just presuming, okay?
She was somewhere there, yes.
Somewhere in Italy. All right. If I went all the way back to great-grandmother, I would be there too. I'd be somewhere in Italy. If I could go back, you could go back 80 years and just say, hey, you will have a grandson and he will spend 16 hours a day on screens. It'll be glass screens. There's going to be a board he'll type on. He's going to like it though. There's going to be a lot of sex is very much going to be premarital. He's going to push a button and a stranger will pick him up with a car. He'll go to foreign cities in a metal tube flying higher than the highest mountains. Like the highest mountain you've seen, old lady, it's like 12 times higher than that. He'll be flying in a metal tube with hundreds of other people, eating food and watching movies. Now you don't know what a movie is, Grandma, but let me explain. And then you explain all of it. If you stopped and said, this
pictures
is
in a quick sequence. That
exactly
makes
right.
Sense,
Yeah. You have to say it,
story.
right? Yeah. So what she would say would probably be two things. This is my guess. So the first one is, that's probably all impossible. So like that couldn't happen. And then the second thing she'd probably say, and this is a very common one for humans, because humans love sacred stuff. She would say, well, people would never let human experience become that bastardized. We're not going to drift that far from what the hell we are. We're not going to do it. We're not going to permit that kind of like hellish world. I don't care if you like it. Like that is not a direction humans are going to take themselves. She would say both of those things. And my guess is when we go forward, you and I have things where we feel the technical impossibility and surely humans would never, but they gonna. And so what are your thoughts about the inevitability of augmentation and the norms of the expansion of powers sort of naturally extending us way beyond the hardware software we have now to the point where 500 years from now, it ain't hominids really mostly. Like, what are your thoughts there? I'm totally open to different arguments. I'm just laying out what would be an argument for something very different than an eternal hominid kingdom.
So a big thing here is that so I am quite a believer that we've had a lot of software upgrades already, and most of them are not local. They're not in a single human. They're distributed. They're cultural.
Yes.
And we already had like a lot of things that you described that could be described and could sound to a listener like a future scenario. We already do right now. Like we some of them we did 2,000 years ago. Like storing memory outside of my brain. My ancestors 2,000 years ago were doing it. It's called writing.
I'm with you.
Like developing writing.
Clearly being able to rip Wikipedia out of my mouth in real time without thinking. I think we can all admit there's a little bit of a step function. Yes, is it a gradient? I'm with you, but I just think there are bigger leaps ahead. I don't think we're done with our leaping.
I completely agree on there are bigger leaps ahead. But I really want to stress the point that like we have already done a lot of these modifications.
I agree.
Many of which without doing any modification at all to our hardware, essentially. I am quite identical. I'm probably a bit healthier, and I ate more food when I was a child and so on. And like my ancestors in the ancestral environment, but like I'm pretty similar to them. Like the size of my brain has gone almost unchanged, more or less, and I have all the same organs and so on. So I think a big part is like, and a big part is going to be like, how do we choose what to pick? This goes back to before like the discarding Darwinism and discarding like more brutish ways of improving ourselves and selecting better ones. Like I think a good compass, like obviously I don't have a solution. Like and I think the reality is that no human right now has like the perfect guide to like here is exactly what the trajectory for humanity should be for 10,000 years.
Yeah, I'm just saying that the argument I'm putting forth is not necessarily what lily pads we jump on to get to the other side of the pond, and there probably is no other side of the pond. But the argument I'm putting forth is that it seems to me like people gonna be jumping, and they gonna be jumping in ways that feel like sacrilege to you and to a lot of people alive today, because the kids that grew up this far from an iPad, they just don't see the world of atoms as like sacred in the way that many, people our age do. And that those changes are inevitable, and that it's very unlikely that should those augmentations be even remotely possible, they wouldn't be prevalent if they were to extend our powers in exactly the ways you said. More, not just more bliss, but more ability to wield our will. Maybe, again, less requirement to do this silly sleep stuff, or other sorts of things like that. I'm merely positing, doesn't it seem to be the case that this form, if the pursuit of power is the ballgame you're articulating, and if people continue to adopt things that their grandmama would have thought was real bad, isn't it the case that like we're almost certainly not going to be a bunch of people with fingernails in 500 years? Like this is what I'm positing, and I'm not saying whether it's good or bad. I'm just saying, do you believe that is we may be on that track?
I think it's like on the specific point of like, are we gonna be not physically humans that we are right now? I don't think it's inevitable. Again, this is why I was really, I really want to insist on
I don't think it's inevitable either. Go ahead. Yeah.
On the software point, I think of like there's a bunch of things that we need to work through, that we can work through right now that I think are fantastic, like better culture at scale, figuring out fundamental moral philosophy at scale. We are like really far away from doing a lot of this stuff, figuring out how to control our own minds. People do this all the time, and like, to a different level of degree, but kind of this point of self-mastery of like being able to be in control of your thoughts, being able to be in control of your actions, like truly in control of your actions, which again, most people, including me, we have emotions, we have kind of events that disturb us. We're not always in control of our actions. Increasing that is going to be a big North Star and a big thing that we can do without having to modify ourselves physically. Now, are we going to decide to modify ourselves physically too? Kind of like going to after the hardware, not just the software? I don't know. Some people are going to try. I don't have the blueprint of like, this should be prohibited and this should be not prohibited. I think, again, the guiding North Star should be, and that we should work on, like that's a vision that we should articulate right now, we should work on, is that we should have this guiding North Star, this guiding principle of we want to expand human agency. There's a lot of things that we have discovered accidentally or intentionally, and we are like amplifying ourselves with right now, which reduce our agency. Addictions, things like addiction, things like crippling effects that give you a state of bliss right now, but will cripple your ability
heroin or something
to
like
think.
that.
Yeah, like these are obviously things that we should start to agree on. Like this is not the way. Like the way is a development that lets you have more agency over yourself, have more agency over the universe. Biological modification, it can take many different shapes. Some of them, like we're already taking them right now, like great success of in smaller form, but like great success of Ozempic. It's like, hey,
yes.
we found a drug that lets you lose weight. There's a lot of stuff like that. Like if we found a drug that actually lets you sleep for 4 hours less every night with no adverse side effects, I obviously would take it.
Where
right?
Where do I send the money? Yeah, where do I
exactly
send it?
like
Just
this.
tell me.
But this again, I don't have all the solutions to the specific choices.
Yeah.
But the guiding principle is, again, with a drug, it increases my agency. It increases people's agency. Like if we could give this drug to everybody, and everybody could now only sleep 4 hours a night, be completely refreshed, not have any side effects when they get older, and so on. They get to live 4 hours more every day. They extend their lifespan.
Yeah.
I think what we can do and what we should do is focus on, if we make it through the ASI filter,
early stages, yes.
Yeah, if we make it to the early stage of like AI, actually get a grip with AI, not let AI kill us all, then start setting up these social principles that we want to expand the positive sum trades. We want to expand human agency and put them as the guiding points, and they will guide these more micro decisions that I think neither me or you can make right now for A, our descendants, B, ourselves in 500 years if we're lucky.
Yeah, we have no clue.
Exactly. We have no clue. Right now we are closer to our ancestors, to our hominid ancestors. We are kind of smarter monkeys right now, and as smarter monkeys we cannot decide on with such precision on what even just ourselves with much better culture and software will be able to do in hundreds of years.
And again, I'm not even positing sort of the Dan prescribed path as I grip the scepter and discern what every human should do. It's somewhat obvious I'm not doing that. I'm simply saying I believe that you and I live like monsters or gods compared to our ancestors, despite that biologically we're similar, and that future generations will almost certainly live as monsters and gods, and I consider it extremely unlikely. People will be trimming their toenails 500 years from now. But I may be wrong, and there may be a great number of people who do so. With that said, you've brought up a lot here, and I want to kind of wrap on this because I think this is kind of key to your own philosophy, and part of the fun of the show here is just getting to like the seed of what drives folks and what they see as that worthy future, because they're different for people, and I don't agree with everybody, but I get to see a lot of interesting ideas and get to learn more about kind of what drives the human heart, I guess, from different vantage points. You've talked a lot about this idea of, expanding our power and ability to wield our own agency. Seems to be a key thing for you. When you think about humanness, like, our specialness, what is it about that, a particular form, right now, biological form, that for you is the precious and worth sort of capturing thing? Is it in part our greater degree of agency than, let's say, my cat or this succulent plant I have by the window. Is it simply that you are a human and I am a human, and by golly, we ought to band together and sort of stick with the tribe, man, and that should be our way of thinking. Like, what is it about the humanness that for you is like, hey, that's got to be the locus in the center here? What is that for you?
Yeah, it's definitely, I'm a human right now. That's
Same here.
Definitely the case. I'm a human right now. I think humans are awesome. I think we've done awesome things in our history. I think, we have built really great things. We have great ways to get together. We have great ways to wield power that would have been unthinkable for our ancestors. And we wielded power to make our lives, our individual lives, our lives of our loved ones, and our lives of everybody else around us great. And we are just getting better at that. Let's keep getting better. Let's not cut this future short. So I'm very happy to say I'm pro-human, and like very clearly pro-human. What do I like about this? Like fundamentally this, like A, I'm one of them. B, and I want to stick out for my species. And if somebody calls me speciesist, so be it.
It's fine. Understandable.
B, we have done awesome things. We have awesome subjective and collective experiences. We are increasingly able, by increasing our power over our environment, to reduce our suffering, to reduce suffering of other beings, and to increase the amount of things that we can do. I think these are intrinsically valuable things. I think they have been great so far, despite, obviously human history has had a lot of down moments, but we've made it so far, and like it's much better for the universe, I believe, that we are here than we are not. And we should not extinguish this torch. And we should not extinguish this torch, and we should give, again, in the same spirit of expanding agency, we should not remove the agency from other humans. We should not remove the agency from our descendants, from ourselves in years from now, to be able to decide on their future. I think this is a big violation of their freedom. It's a big violation of the great things that humanity has done. We should take these trades where we expand our ability to choose, not just gamble it all away and give it and pass it down to something else that is not human. We don't even know what it's going to seek to do. We shouldn't just randomly give the torch to AI that has nothing to do with us. And
I'm with you there. I mean, look, I think willy-nilly hurling life in whatever direction and then just dying and crossing your fingers feels absolutely stupid. So I'm completely with you.
Exactly.
In at least that respect, I'm completely with you. For you, is there a mandate? I mean, knowing these things, you're talking about some things like, decreasing suffering, maybe increasing well-being. We have the agency to do that. I'm certainly grateful I'm a human. I mean, it's way better than being a rabbit as far as I'm concerned. I've had some unique kinds of suffering that only humans can have, but I've also gotten to do more things because I'm a human, and all my best friends are human, and the people I love. And, so it's a good suit to be born into. I don't know how I ended up in it, but like there's other suits I look around, I'll be like, I wouldn't have liked that one as much. So like, it's a good one. Reducing of suffering, increasing of well-being, achieving of worthwhile things collectively, individually. We could imagine some people do, authors even that you posit here, like Hanson's had some interesting stuff about this, that we could imagine entities that can feel and experience in the way that we can. Now, I'm not saying that if that's the case, then we should all just walk off a cliff like lemmings. I'm just saying it might be the case that something that bubbles up from even that we are in control of may be able to experience richness and depth in a sentient sense in a way that is like as much as the city of Waltham, Massachusetts, or something like that. Like, like as much as 100,000 people or what have you, or you have this preference for agency. It may be the case that you and I have flickers of agency amidst mostly just biological billiard balls bumping into each other. It may be the case we have none, in which case, whatever. I have to write that one off, because if that's the case, then I'm just saying the things I was always going to say, and who cares? But let's just say we have flickers, right? That even in this conversation, some of this was just Dan autopilot and some of this was Andrea autopilot, but some of this we had flickers. We may find that the AI may be able to have a more permanently turned on volition, a more alive life in that particular regard. Now, this isn't to say that we all, again, walk off the cliff like lemmings, but it would almost seem like if those are the morally worthy traits for you, part of your mandate in an ideal world, and again, everybody's got the right to paint their picture here, I'm just trying to shake yours out, might be, let's make sure maybe AI is not sentient, blissful or not, like maybe let's leave that off the table of AI, and maybe even a certain degree of agency, we should bind AI as well, assuming you'd want to keep hominidness. And you had talked about not letting this torch go out. My guess is this torch is going to evolve. I've kind of made my argument to you there. I think this torch is going to bubble into other stuff. If you recall, you and I done bubbled up from other stuff, right? There was a fish with legs. We go back enough grandmamas and we get to the fish with legs. But to your point, it seems like given what is morally valuable, it might be important to bar that from other substrates. I mean, what are your thoughts there? Because those are moral concerns if those things could feel and experience. What are your thoughts there?
I think on that we go back to we don't understand at all. Like we don't understand at all what we're doing with AI. So and honestly, frankly, we don't even like things like consciousness or words like consciousness and so on. They are unsolved philosophical questions. Like are we conscious? Like yes, no, maybe, depends on definition. How do we measure it? Subjective experience. That's not a great scientific tool to wield. How do we know whether other animals have the same or not? Like, fundamentally, we are out of our depth here. I don't think we need to be out of our depth forever. I think we can figure out
the hope. The hope is we will be able to make some breakthroughs there. Yeah. That's the hope.
At some point, we should make those breakthroughs. But like at the moment, what I think we should focus on, but at the moment, I also expect it's going to be the case for a bunch of time. Like evolutionary timescales that you refer to are very long. We're gonna go
Certainly.
faster on a lot of things, but
we're gonna go significantly faster, I suspect. But yeah,
we're gonna go faster on a lot of things. But like time, the universe still takes its sweet time, and we have a bunch of it. Fundamentally, for now, and my position is, I'm human, I'm pro-human. I want to find all of the ways in which we can expand humanity's own abilities. This is a very clear bias.
What I'm getting at is that should we bar those things from machines? In other words, these traits. One of the traits is just I'm human. Boom, and I get it. I think that is probably going to be the default. I think most humans will agree with you. To give you credence there, I think most humans will agree with you on that. But I'm just saying, should we carve out certain classes of experience, etc., if we were to realize they were bubbling up, to ensure that any idea of moral relevance would not be extended to machines by design? Because again, I think for you that would be the vision, is to really make this human-centric, human at the center. Should we think about a science of detecting and maybe deterring that stuff in totally alien substrates, at least for the near term? Like, would that be a mandate in your opinion?
I think this is like, this goes back to the massive unsolved moral philosophy questions that we haven't solved. I think I don't have an answer right now for those. And I don't have an answer whether it's preventable, whether it's even meaningful to say prevent, whether there is need to prevent it. Like there are going to be imperatives. Some imperatives are going to be, we don't want to wipe ourselves out. That's what we want, what we don't want right now. And, if future humans make, they have some kind of just process where they decide to do so, I would find it very displeasing, but it's not going to be my choice to be. And we might want to also put things in place there to prevent it. But for now, like the main goal is going to be understand AI enough, understand other substrates enough to make sure we don't wipe ourselves out. That's instantly deleting our agency forever. And then the real answer is we don't know. Like I think again, as the monkeys that we are right now, are like a little bit better than monkeys for sure. We're not gonna find answers to those. Let's build a way for humanity that has done much more reflection, that has the capabilities to do much more reflection than we can do, that has advanced much more into science and philosophy and morality to solve these questions after us.
Yeah, I think giving ourselves some time to think is a pretty rational idea here. And I think for those of you who are tuned in, some of you are more cosmist or anthropocentric than others. But I think hopefully for all of you, not squashing our agency right now, probably a pretty reasonable priority, Andrea. And in that regard, I don't think there's any way to disagree. But it's been a lot of fun being able to dance through the near-term steps and potentially the long-term futures, even beyond what you've already had written down. I know that's all we have for time, but it's been a real blast to be able to have you here, Andrea. It's been fun.
Same, super fun, and great to dig deeper in a lot of these things. Thank you so much, Dan.
So that's all for this episode of The Trajectory. Thank you for tuning in, and a big thank you to Andrea for being able to be here with us. I thought it was cool to see some of Andrea's ideas about what the hard requirements of early coordination might be. I think a lot of people see AGI governance as inherently requiring immediate totalitarian tyranny, and I very much don't think that's the case. Who knows if narrow path is the way, but it's at least a proposed set of pathways forward, certainly more fleshed out than most people's current ideas, and definitely worth considering. You saw a little bit of pushback about what sort of that post-AI under control future would be like. I think in the safety world, it is somewhat common to sort of push back against sort of what do we do after we get to safety, because then people start to disagree. But on this program, that's very much what we're here to talk about. So tried to push into there a little bit. We do exactly the same kind of pushing in our next episode. And interestingly enough, Andrea is connected to our next guest in the AGI Governance series, our guest number 5, who I won't give you the name of, but happens to have a fine mustache. That should be enough clue for some of you who are in the know. So you'll have to stick around for that one. But 2 weeks from now, that one will air. So hope to catch you back here on The Trajectory. Thanks so much.